Welcome everyone to
Welcome.
episode 2 of Pops and Champ. We are so
Yes, we
excited
are.
that you guys are joining us today.
Woo-hoo.
I am Champ,
They call me Pops. You already know.
Pops and Champ.
Pops and
That is
Champs in the
us.
house. Yes, yes.
Today we have a very, very special guest
Yes,
joining
we do.
us. She is the one that is and was very instrumental
Yes, she
in
was.
helping me and my father communicate better and reconnect in a very different way to where I was able to hear him better and he hear me as well. And so I want to just start off by introducing Dr. Faye.
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Faye
yeah.
is in the
So
building.
good to be here.
Yes.
Yes,
And if you
yes.
watched episode 1, we talk about Dr. Faye on episode 1. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch it.
Yeah, make sure you watch
But
it.
Dr.
Pops
Faye,
and
I
Champ.
want to have you first just introduce yourself.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work with individuals, couples, families, groups. I work with polyamorous families, polygamous families. I work with persons of very different ethnic, religious, cultural backgrounds. I deal with persons who are challenged with depression, anxiety, grief, trauma, sexual trauma. So I deal with a variety of persons. I'm also an assistant professor of pastoral care and counseling at the Interdenominational Theological Center. That's the ITC. It's a seminary. We sit right in between Morris Brown and Clark University on the famous AUC campus. I have been working in this field for over 15 years. This is the second half of my life. The first half of my life was in higher ed and communications. I thought that that was going to be the lifetime career, and God had a different plan. And midway through life, I changed fields. And I got it already designed the path because I have 2 master's degree, a master of divinity, but also a master of communications and counseling. So even though I had not planned to go in therapy, my unconscious had me to minor in counseling back when I graduated in 1981. So my field is varied in terms of therapy and teaching. And I like to say my therapy practice informs my teaching, and my teaching informs my therapy practice. So that's a little bit of who I am.
Awesome, awesome. Dr. Faye, you were there for our first episode. And for me, I was naked. I was vulnerable. I literally opened myself up to the world. And it was very, very difficult for me. But because, my daughter came to me and asked me, she said, Dad, the Lord have placed something in my spirit. What you think about it? And I thought about it for a couple of days, and I agreed to do it. And that is not something easy to do. You saw the first episode. What are your thoughts about the first episode that you actually saw?
Well, I want to commend both of you for that episode. I was very pleased with the fact that you two were both so transparent, sharing your emotions, your feelings, your real lives, and you were vulnerable. That vulnerability demonstrated how authentic you all were being, and I believe that is what will attract persons to listen and to learn from your story. I believe this is going to be really impactful, your podcast, in terms of helping fathers to understand the perspective of what it's like to not be in the life of their daughter, but also the impact. And your vulnerability is helping other Black men to see through your eyes and not see through mine or another
Wow.
female, and they can say,
Wow.
okay, this is somebody I can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are daughters who are looking through your eyes and saying, wow, there's another woman who feels like I do. But then you intersect the two, and we see how
Yes.
now in your vulnerability and your transparency, you all are connecting and living life in a different way. So that is all of the thoughts that were running through my head as I'm sitting there and I'm listening to you, and I'm saying, oh, how impactful this is going
Wow.
to be,
Yeah.
because I haven't seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank
I was
you.
just so, I was scared. I was so fearful. I had emotions just out of whack. And wow, I was actually doing it. I could believe I was actually doing it. It's almost like a out of body experience that I was actually putting myself on display for criticism, for what have you. It was just, it was even after for 3 days, I was emotionally in a wreck because what actually took place,
Yeah.
on that couch when my daughter was drilling me, like she was literally bottling waters. If you I remember bottled waters, she asked deep questions, and it was just so real. That's all.
Can I commend you for being that open and transparent? Because what I saw was a person who was willing to risk it all for the
Wow,
relationship with
Yeah.
their daughter.
glory.
And I could not imagine how that would be for you in the aftermath.
Yeah.
You never would have even imagined that you were as afraid as you were. But me working with African American men as I have, I recognize that this has to be difficult.
Yeah.
Being a person who is ordained in the ministry, I could think about those who are religious. I didn't say followers of Christ. I said
Yes, yes.
religious, who would judge you for not just being transparent, but also being vulnerable enough to talk like you
Yep.
really felt
Yep.
and express your real emotions. So I
Whoa.
want to commend you for
Thank you.
being able to be real, open, and honest so that persons who are just lay persons who are struggling with what you all have struggled with
Yes.
are able to hear you. And there's no telling how many black men you impacted because of your realness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we as black men, we're afraid to be transparent because of the judgment, because of what we think that our family would say, our friends, our coworkers. We're afraid to be vulnerable because of the judgment, and they size you up and start looking at you differently. So it was just through prayer, and literally, just stepping out of that boat and stepping out on faith, and just hoping that
Yeah.
Jesus would grab my hand before I sink. That actually lead to going into our next question. When a daughter doesn't have her dad, you know, in her life growing up, talking middle school, elementary school, you know, didn't have him had an opportunity for him to teach her about, back in the day we called the birds and the bees boys, you know. How does that having that void of a father affect her as she grows up and become an adult, a young lady, that father absent from being in her life?
So it doesn't start in elementary, especially if a father is absent from the beginning. It starts in the very beginning. There is this psychological phenomenon we call mirroring
Okay.
for the child to be able to see themselves in the role models, the parents. So I'm going back to an old psychologist, Sigmund Freud, who used to talk about the Oedipus complex. He always talked about how the child was always drawn to impressing the parent of the
Whoa.
opposite sex,
Okay.
and how they thrived on and wanted so much their affection and love. So if the father is not present there in those beginning days and on with the daughter, that daughter does not have that opposite gender parent to love on them and to show them who they are. And that's why they call it mirroring. So when Latrice is looking at you as a child, she's looking at herself. We think about it as a girl, I'm looking at my mother, and so that's who I
Right.
am. Well, that's a part
Emulating.
of it.
Okay.
But a large part of it is, as the daughter is looking at dad, she is now identifying who she is and how to relate to this person of the opposite sex. So when you talk about what's happening as she's growing up, if the father's not present, she's not learning how to engage and interact with the opposite sex. So let's just take the opposite scenario.
Okay.
If that father is present, and not just physically present, but emotionally present,
Okay.
then that father is teaching that daughter how to have conversations, what to look for. And this is not about just having a conversation about the birds and bees. When you have a father who is there and present and showing that daughter there's certain ways you talk to a woman, certain ways you should not talk to a woman, that girl then grows up recognizing there's just certain ways I'm not going to let a man talk to me.
Right.
My daddy don't talk to me like that.
I got you.
And my dad is always opening doors for me. My dad's always, oh no, that's the way I'm supposed to be engaging with a man. And that's the kind of man that I'm looking for. Unfortunately, when the father's not present, that daughter doesn't see herself and she begins to wonder, as Latrice stated,
Yes, all right.
what's wrong with me?
Yes, that was.
Why does my father not want me or want to be with me? And instead of them recognizing the character flaw at that time in their father, they only internalize there's something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me.
Wow.
And so you end up, as a daughter, not having the self-esteem that you should, not feeling that you're worthy, feeling that you are useless, worthless, and as a consequence, end up attaching yourself to similar situations.
So I would agree with attaching myself to similar situations because as an adult with me dating, I was, talking to men or chasing men that didn't want me, but I was, I think, emulating, didn't know. I never, at the time, never felt real love. I didn't know what a healthy love was from a man. And so that's what I was used to, kind of I guess, maybe chasing my dad as a kid. And so growing up, and then dating men, I guess you can say I emulated that same type of thing,
So we are drawn to what is familiar. There is a earlier psychologist by the name of Carl Jung, Jung, who talks about how it is important for us to bring the unconscious to the conscious.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because our lived experiences, our emotions, our environment, all of those things make up our unconscious. So think about how your father's not present, there's no emotional attachment. So all of that's situated in your unconscious, but your unconscious is what drives you.
Right.
Because we only operate in 10% consciousness. It's 50% unconscious, 40% subconscious. So 90% of what we're doing until we become intentional and learn better is unconscious driving us. So now you're driven to what's familiar because that's everything that's collected in your unconscious, this absentee person. And so you are driven to that. But the most unusual thing about this phenomenon is when you are in those situations, the reason why you keep being drawn, not just because they're familiar, But you're drawn into those situations because your unconscious is now trying to rework it to get a different outcome. So each time you go in thinking you can get a different outcome, the person that was not there, maybe this time this person will be there.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's true. That's definitely familiar. I can think of a couple of instances, where I went into the same situation thinking that I would get a different outcome, and it was essentially the same. So, it definitely affected me. What would you say would be some coping mechanisms, that fatherless daughters like face?
Unfortunately, that's when you see a lot of perfectionism, overcommitting, the overcompensating to try to prove to oneself that they are worthy,
Yep.
that they are okay. And so they will find themselves getting involved in not only relationships that are not good for them, but trying to demonstrate I'm okay. And that perfectionism causes them to overcommit and overwork themselves and overdo. There are those who will also resort to substances to try to feel better about themselves
Yeah.
because of the void. And of course, as I stated, the relationships, attaching, that's one of the coping mechanisms, thinking that if I get in this relationship with this person, even though they've seen all the red flags, they're thinking that they can make that person care for them, be there for them. And then there are those who are also sexually promiscuous as a way of coping, hoping that they can get a feeling of belonging. I don't know if you recall the old sociology chart, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, the basic needs, food, shelter, and
Yeah,
water, but
yeah.
the next is belonging. Before you can get to self-esteem and self-actualization, that need of belonging has to be met. And so you find the fatherless daughter always seeking, searching to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And so they will use all kinds of mechanisms, whether it's sex, drugs, food, you know,
To feel that
to fill that void.
that void. Okay.
And what about just like, I guess, and not even sexual, like someone that always has to have a boyfriend? Is that an outcome of like a daughter maybe that didn't have a healthy relationship with their dad?
It can be. You've heard of attachment theories, and so that anxious attachment, wanting to feel they belong, and so they get really anxious not being attached to someone because they don't have the security of that person that was there who could walk out, come back in. You know how dad goes off to work, but we know dad's coming back.
Right.
That gives you a secure attachment because you know dad's gonna be there even if dad has to go to work. But if dad walks out and we don't see dad again, then we start to feel that anxiousness, and that will cause us to attach to someone just to feel we belong.
So earlier you stated, Dr. Faye, that a child emulates like the parents that are in the household. And for me, I can remember as a child, telling my cousin, like, when I grow up, I want to be a single mom. Like, because that's what I saw. And that's what I thought it, like a family was, or, being this independent woman, because that's what I saw my mom doing. But as I got older, I'm like, wait, that's not right, but that's what I saw. And so how do we break that cycle that kind of perpetuates in some families where, the mom is a single mom, the grandma was a single mom, and now the daughter is a single parent. So like, how do we break that cycle within generations?
So in terms of persons marrying and not marrying, that's a difficult thing now because of just the way people are thinking about marriage, but one of the most important things in single mom households is to make sure that they find male role models for their children. We're not just talking about for their boys, but especially for their daughters as well. And we have to make sure it's safe and appropriate. But we need those uncles, real uncles, not quote
Yeah,
uncles,
yeah.
but we
Not
need
just onk. I got you. Yeah.
we need those male role models who are able to demonstrate how women should be treated, how to talk to women, what to expect, and just so that the daughters in the family can start to see that, as so many of our mothers unfortunately have said, all men are not alike.
Yep.
So role modeling has to be something different in order to break that generational pattern and curse. And I think that education is so key. We have to start having real hard conversations as families that start not just in the home, but and in the church, but just society wide, where we're very careful, especially, and I'm just being specific because my research is with African American men, and that is, even though
Us.
we have had challenges, we've got to be very careful about the language that we're using with regard to talking about African American men.
Right.
And even if there is an African American male saying some things that are derogatory and hurtful, let's have the conversations one-on-one instead of social media, because social media is nothing but cowardice. It's cowardly
Yeah.
to have those attacks on social media. We've got to start having conversations about how do we reunite the black family, and how, even if the families are broken, how do we make sure that our children are covered. I think we have fallen for the myth that the black family is just prone to be broken.
Right. Yeah.
That is not true,
Right.
because even after, emancipation in the Reconstruction area, we had family members who walked for thousands of miles to find their family members. And
Educate.
our
Come on.
families, as black families,
Yes.
Yeah.
we were stronger after the Reconstruction. And data even demonstrates that more of our black families were together. And then something happened,
Whoa.
which was systemic
Yep.
and intentional, because the powers that be saw
Yep.
that when the African American family was together, not only were we strong financially, we were strong morally,
Yep.
ethically,
Yep.
and always. We were just strong. That's
Yeah.
how businesses were built.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
how people were educated, how we were healthier mentally and physically.
Yes.
So we've got to have these conversations. And even though the system has co-opted certain persons in our culture to say that enslavement stuff, don't talk about that, that's yours. You cannot dismiss the fact that we are operating in the residual effects of what happened 400 years ago, and that systems have perpetuated it and magnified it to the point where we are now fragmented.
Right.
So we got to have the conversations like this, like
Yeah.
what you all are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. To just understand like our history and where we are today. And it's not, I don't want to say it's not our fault. That may not be the right thing, but
Well,
You know-
forgive me for interjecting, because I do not want, as people are listening, for them to think that I am saying this is an excuse.
right.
Okay.
And
Right.
this is something to lean on or
Clarify.
crutch.
Right.
But the only way that you can start to do something different in terms of mental health is you have to understand what are the origins of the
Right.
problem,
Yeah.
so that I can start to do something different, and so that I can tackle those challenges that are still in action or in effect as a consequence of the origin.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Dr. Faye, I've had a session with you, and when I first thought about it, I really I had my boundaries up. I did. I was gonna be very defensive. But after, having that conversation with you, you pointed out some things. You educated me. You enlightened me. You said some things that sort of hit below the belt, but it's the truth. And they say, the truth hurt, but but the truth also heals. And because of you, my daughter and I, we have a better relationship, and I want to thank you for that. Can you talk about how therapy can help just anybody in general, just going through therapy?
One of the things in our community, the African American community, that is a challenge for us is destigmatizing mental health.
It is
And recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health.
physical.
And so I would say to anyone trying to understand the importance of therapy is that you need to look at your mental health the same way you look at your physical
Health.
Yeah.
So when it comes to our physical health, we will, well,
Most of us.
many of us
Many of us.
will do our checkups, or we will get testing, or we will go in to make sure that there are no problems, that everything is okay. But if we're not so concerned about our physical health, then I'll take it for the men who are watching to our transportation. We don't wait. I don't know too many black men
Come on.
who will wait until the car breaks down before they go and
Change
it
the
out.
oil.
They are consistently checking the oil.
That's right.
Checking the transmission, checking the tires, checking for scuffs, paint, checking for whatever could be going wrong. And I believe that it's just as important that we do that with our mental health. We have blinders. It's just like the side mirrors on the car. We need those because they're blind spots. And so the same with our mental health. There are blind spots. And I know that there are many who say, there's not a man or woman can tell me what I need to know. I know what I need to do. But then that's saying you're God.
Whoa.
Because how is it that you know everything? We all have blind spots, and God has given us persons here on earth, just like lawyers, tax collectors, and remember Jesus was with them all.
Well, yeah.
Yes, he was.
And
He didn't discriminate.
even one of the disciples was a physician. So
Talk good.
if God has given us these people to here on earth to help us, what's wrong with going with someone to help us with the blind spots?
Right.
We all need therapists. Everyone needs a safe space where they can go and do self-reflective, introspective work to maintain their sanity. You don't wait until there's something wrong either to go and check up on your mental health.
Yeah, I can.
And when I say everyone, I'm including myself.
And including yourself, you have a therapist as well.
Yes, and I believe
And you are a
that-
therapist.
I believe any therapist who does not have a therapist has a problem.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
there's
We don't.
absolutely no way I can see the number of people I see every day hold those stories,
Yep.
address all those issues,
Yeah.
and not have a safe space to go and work through the triggered areas in my life from sitting with others.
I can relate.
So I know I'll get regarding some therapists who say, I don't need, but
Wow.
I truly believe we all need a
So
safe
some therapists
space.
think they're above therapists for their own selves,
I'm
or
not gonna say
we ain't gonna talk about that. We ain't gonna talk about. I can relate me growing up in my era. If I was to have had a therapist, say in 93, 92, I would consider to be cray cray, something wrong with you as an African American. Why are you going to a therapist? You don't need no therapist. You know what I'm saying? That it was considered to be cray cray. It was not taught. We was not educated about, you know, being therapeutic. What advice? It's kind of like a two-part. I'm gonna ask really two questions. What advice would you give a father that is trying to start a relationship, with his daughter, trying to, get it going, kind of like myself. I was just in a fog. I didn't know how to get out of that funk. What advice would you give a father trying to start having a better relationship with his daughter, and vice versa? What will you give a daughter that's trying to initiate a relationship, with the father, to get it started?
I think for both, it starts with acknowledgement of where you are.
Where you are, okay?
For as a father, being able to be honest about what happened, where am I, what kind of help I need, and the daughter being able to acknowledge her hurt, her wounds, her pain. Dad may have some hurt and wounds as well.
Wow.
And so a professional licensed person, such as a therapist, just as how you did, can help you first to identify what's happening inside of you. What happened with me? How did I even get to this space? And the daughter being able, because you know that there are so many young ladies who will say, well, he ain't been there. I don't care. I'm over it. But they're not really.
Over it.
No, because
Wow.
it's showing up in different areas of their lives, in the way they engage people, the way they engage relationships with friends and the person whom they are in a romantic relationship with. And so it starts first with honesty with self,
Honesty.
and then getting with a professional to help them navigate that honesty before even attempting to engage.
with each other just on a
Yeah.
conversation
A
basis.
mediator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just the mediating
But
part.
just the
It's the individual self-reflection. Where am I? What are my thoughts and feelings about getting back with my father, my daughter? What happened? How did this happen? Because until you are able to do some self-reflection about what's
Right.
happening with you,
Yeah.
once you engage with one another, you're not going to be able to hear each other because you're still trying to get the other person to understand what's going on with you,
Yep.
and you don't even
No,
understand
That's so true.
what's
going on.
happening
Yeah.
with
with
you.
your own self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think with me and my dad, that was
Yeah.
us for a long time. Like we kept butting heads. Like I really feel like we really didn't hear each other or understand each other until we came to you. So I think that's really good advice to, one, be honest with each other,
With yourselves
with
first.
yourself, with
First.
yourselves first, and with each other, but also seek a therapist or a counselor that can help you navigate those conversations and those internal feelings that you guys have, because they can also help guide the conversation. Yeah. So I think that's really good advice. But then does the daughter like call the dad like, hey dad, this is what I'm thinking, like how do you
Start that.
recommend like
Just, yeah.
she reaches out
Out
or
to
he
it.
reaches out? Because for a long time I think my dad was trying to connect with me, but I was kind of like, bro, you had your shot, like I don't what you want? Leave, like,
Right.
I think he was like trying, but I wasn't hearing it because I felt like you weren't there for me. Like, I don't owe you anything. Like, I don't, at this point, I don't need you, And so I think for a long time he was like fighting, but how do you recommend the daughter or the father? Like, what's that first step? Is it a phone call? Is it a letter? Is it like, what do you think?
So that varies according to the individuals in the relationship. But I want to
Okay.
ask you a question. How did you feel when your dad continually persisted in terms of trying to connect with you?
In the beginning, I I just felt like why are you coming around now? Like, and like, what do you want? Basically,
Pops, what you want?
yeah. It was kind of like you weren't there for me. I don't.
Right.
You don't have to. I'm grown now, so
Yeah.
you know what can we do now? Like,
Or
so
what can you do for me?
yeah.
Yeah.
You mean like what?
Just in general, what can you do for me now?
Oh,
I'm grown.
oh yeah,
I,
right. Like, yeah, like what can
I'm
you do
good.
for me
I
now?
got everything I need. I can take care of myself.
Yeah.
Nah.
So it was like, what's the point in you trying to pursue me now? But I will say, after he continued, like that persistent type of, well, he'd be like, baby, let's go eat, or let's go do this, or let's go do that. It's like, oh, well, maybe he really is trying. And after a while, I was like, all right, well, he means it because his actions and his behavior. And I saw something on Instagram the other day, and this guy was like, it's one thing to say, I'm sorry, but it's another thing to actually have a change behavior after that, I'm sorry. And I think that's something that my dad had. It was the, I'm sorry, this is where I was, but also the action behind it. And so that's what made me believe him, not just the words of saying, I want us to have a better relationship, I'm sorry, and that's it. Like, no, he actually put in effort. And that's what I think I maybe said on the first episode.
So his effort and his persistence, and then his consistency.
Yep.
And
Consistency.
after the
Yep.
change of behavior,
Yes.
not just a change of behavior, but his consistency.
Right.
So you just answered your question.
Yeah.
It takes persistence because there is that wall
Yep.
that's there most times because you haven't been here. So why should I open my heart up
Yep.
again to be heard? And so it will take persistence.
Yep.
And sometimes dad is the initiator and sometimes the daughter is. But I believe that it's important for the parent to do as Pops did,
Yeah.
to initiate.
Yeah. And I think, so I've had conversations with a few of my friends, and it's almost like the dad feels like the daughter owes them something.
Wow.
They come from, that standpoint. And they also aren't as, like, I guess the word humble about it, And I think that's where I think the dad has to take a step back and own and be vulnerable and
That's right.
just really take accountability for what happened. And I think it starts there. I think when you can stand up and kind of own what you did, I think that can, even if it doesn't open the door, it's like, wow, okay, all right, I see you you were honest. Which leads me to, like, as daughters, and how do we humanize our dad?
That's the key right there. That's the key, is being able to recognize that dad is human,
Yeah.
that dad is frail just like
Yeah.
we are,
Wow.
that we are as human beings this entity that God created with choice,
Yep.
and that some of the choices we make are hurtful and harmful, and we make these mistakes, and some of us don't know how to recover from these mistakes because we haven't had that kind of modeling and support to help us to make different choices. That's inner work that an individual has to do, but it's hard to see the human side of dad when you're filled with so much hurt and
Yep.
pain.
Wow.
And
Yep.
when you have that kind of hurt and pain, that's a space for you, instead of saying, I want to reconnect or I don't want to reconnect with dad. Maybe the space to start with is, I need to reconnect it with me.
Yeah.
And I really believe, I forgot in mentioning my credentials that I'm an ordained minister.
Okay. Preacher.
And And so I believe that we can't reconnect to self except through reconnecting with God.
Wow.
However you see God.
Right.
Mm.
Because I know we see God in different ways, and we have to understand that that's a personal relationship. And as we connect with that divine power
Yep.
that's greater than us, and oftentimes we get so frustrated because we've already idealized God as Superman to come in.
Yep.
You didn't do this, you didn't do that.
Mm.
And so that's that place of wrestling,
Yep.
that you wrestle with God and try to learn who you are. Because it's hard to connect with anybody who's hurt you if you don't reconnect with you.
Yeah.
You gotta connect with yourself first. So that's the work you and I did.
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
That wrestle sometimes will leave you with a limp.
Mm.
It doesn't always
Preacher.
cure everything, but it causes you to it takes you to a higher place with
Right.
God.
Right.
So that's what I'm
Wow.
talking about, trying to connect so that I get to know who I am.
Mm.
And also it's like seeing me how God sees me.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing how most babies, the majority of babies, what's their first word?
That.
That.
So we're talking about not only a psychological, physical phenomena, but we're talking about a spiritual phenomenon. And we
Wow.
keep seeing how when that spiritual phenomenon is broken, when there's a disconnect there, it is a trauma wound to
Yep.
the soul.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why the connection with God has to be addressed.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And in that, when we're connecting with self, let me just back up. Earlier you mentioned how, daughters will be like, well, he ain't been here. I'm good. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need him. Like, it doesn't affect me anymore. Is that really true? Because I think in the beginning I kind of said that, but I was really hurt on the inside, And I think, to your point, I had this wall up. And so I kind of, I guess, numbed those feelings. But with women that I speak to, I have friends and just women I meet, some of them, they're like, well, I mean, at this point, I don't need him. He hasn't done anything for me. I'm fine. But are they really fine?
So again, not to overgeneralize, there may be some persons, some women who are functioning in a way that is optimal for them. But that kind of hurt and pain shows up in other spaces. There are women, especially Black women, who have become perfectionists at suppressing emotions in order to survive.
Yep. Yep.
Becoming that independent woman. I don't need anybody. But yet in their relationships and how they engage others, not just the romantic relationships, but just engaging other people, you can see there is an anger, a frustration, a hurt, and a pain. But they are not attributing it to the disconnect from dad. That's just the way I
Yep.
am.
Whoa.
Yep.
We love to say that, it is what it is. That's just who I am. Well, how is it that you be who you be?
Yeah.
What is the source of that?
Meaning they've turned trauma experiences into that's just my personality. Not
just my
understanding.
person.
Yep. Not understanding it's a trauma response.
Yeah. Yeah. So in answer to your question, I don't think that most women who say they're over it are really over it, but they have learned how to live with it. Some ways are functional and some are dysfunctional.
Does those women, does that affect them in their romantic relationships at all?
I think if we were to do a survey, you'd find that many of them, if they do honest self-reflection, they can talk about how they have trouble with stabilize the relationships.
Wow.
But yet they're not attributing it to anything that has to do with their formative experience. I don't like that phrase, daddy issues.
So if here's my question. So now we're at a place where this daughter, say for instance, she's reached out. The dad has reached out many of times. And again, I think it's very beneficial, dads, if you are trying to reconnect with your daughter, it's going to take more than one time. It's going to
Yes,
take more than
that's
three
right.
times. Like you have to be consistent and persistent because she hasn't seen that in you in so many years. So it's like you have to change that behavior and be consistent. I look at it as, you know, if you lost your girl and you wanted her back, guess what? You gonna fight to the
Do
finish
whatever it
to do
takes
whatever it takes to
to
try to
get
get
boo
her
back in the
back.
house.
And I think that should be, you know, the same with your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
In that though, what if the daughter's reached out, she's, you know, she's tried, she's wrote the letter, she's did the inner work, she's, you know, had the communication, she sent the text, like, and nothing is happening with the dad and he's not putting forth effort. What does she do?
She sets healthy boundaries for herself,
Mm-hmm.
and she takes care of herself, and she has a conversation with herself, recognizing she's done everything she can to reconnect with dad, and now it's up to dad. And sometimes things may not change before that person leaves this earth. But that's when that daughter has to really spend time in therapy to understand they did everything they could.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not because there's something wrong with them, that they're not worthy and valuable,
Yeah.
but that there's something going on with dad. And that's a space of not excusing dad, but humanizing dad to recognize there is some pain, some challenges, some issues, something that's going on with dad where he's just not able to do what I need him to do. So I've got to accept that and set some really healthy boundaries. I've done all I can.
Right.
So I cannot continue to put myself in a space where I am being hurt over and over again with rejection.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. Because you can keep getting let down, you know, and that can be very hurtful. What about the daughter that has lost her dad and they never got a chance to make amends? How does she deal with that? If she still has that hurt and that pain of him not being there, but they never even got a chance to work it out.
That's a very difficult situation. And so now we're dealing on a real spiritual realm where that daughter has to do the work of writing letters, actually articulating, and we call it externalization, where they
Yes.
externalize all those thoughts, those feelings, those dreams, those desires, the anger, the pain, and all of that. They take it out of here and put it on paper.
Right.
Yes.
So we talk sometimes about rituals and ceremonies where you put all this in writing, and instead of allowing it to hang around, you might
Burn it.
go and burn it.
Burn it.
And
Yes,
let it
sir.
go.
Yeah.
And you are okay with revisiting those
Yes.
feelings and emotions from time to time and having those out loud conversations, going in the backyard. You know, Dad,
That's right. Yeah.
you know, I'm so angry with you. I cannot believe
Let it
what
out.
you did. And being able to really externalize all of those emotions because that person's no longer here.
Right.
But on a spiritual plane, you can now get some of that out. But the therapeutic work is so critical because this person is gone now and you have not had the opportunity. Even if they were living, you still may not have had the opportunity, but they're gone. It is final now.
Yeah.
Right.
Really
My
can't
Lord.
talk to them. So going to therapy can help you to process all of the frustration, the anger, the hurt, and the pain. And this is not to say it goes away. This is not about alleviating. It is about learning how to manage the emotions that we have regarding whatever the hurt and pain is.
Externalizing and not holding that stuff in is what I,
Yeah.
got from that.
There's a song, I think it was, I'm not going to call the artist because I don't want to call the wrong artist, but he said, God did not create us to worry. And I don't know if he recognized what he was saying is God did not create our brains to hold all of that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so if
Now
we
you
can
preaching.
externalize and get it out, we'll feel so much better.
That relate to the scripture, 1 Peter 5:7. He said, cast all your cares upon him, for he cared for you. So he wants our cares. He wants us to give it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, I'll be a father to the fatherless, a mother to the motherless. So he wants us to give it to him because a lot of things we can't handle, but he can handle it.
And I think that's where, good point there. I think to your point, we always try to control and handle things on our own. But God is like, I made you and I am here so that you can cast all your worries and your fears and your anger. Put that on me.
Yeah.
I can handle it. You can't. To your point.
And God is saying, I created these roles and these people. This is not the enemy's creation.
Yeah.
I created these people to help guide you in this space of casting all your cares and worries on me and learning how to manage them.
Right.
Wow.
Because there's certain emotions that are just not going anywhere.
Yeah. And I think when you're not connected to God, it makes a big difference in how you live your life. Like, I feel like when I think I've told you this, Dad, like I knew God before, but now I have a personal relationship with him and my life is just so much better. I feel so much more at
Testify.
peace. I feel like I don't have to worry about so many things. I'm letting go of control. Like I can't control any of this stuff anyway. And so I think connecting to your point, when you have that foundational understanding and you have that connection to God, you can also just cope a lot better.
You can, and I don't want to purport that it is easy or
Right.
it makes it easy
Yep,
No.
just
exactly.
because you have the
Yep.
relationship with
Yep.
God. But it is a foundation that helps in ways that I can only talk from my experience and
Yeah.
what I've seen in others' lives, that with that foundation, it helps to manage life in a different way. There are those who say, well, that's your crutch. I say, yes, that is my crutch. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's it. It's
I
just
agree.
okay.
Yeah. So, for individuals that are watching this show and they're like, man, I want to seek help. I think I need to now talk to a therapist. What do you recommend that they do?
So if they're working, they can start with, many companies have employee assistance programs and they can go through them. If they're not comfortable in dealing with a therapist through their EAP program, there's so many platforms you can use. I recommend psychologytoday.com.
Okay.
I like that platform because you get to see the picture of the therapist.
Okay.
You get to see all the modalities, all the different techniques they use.
Credentials.
You get to read about their philosophy, all the different people that they
sounds
work
cool.
with, the
Yeah.
different demographics,
Yep.
what their fees are. You
Oh,
just get
wow.
an entire profile. And all you need to do when you go to psychologytoday.com is put in a zip code or a name
Wow.
if you know that name. I'm listed on psychologytoday.com. So if you put in Dr. Faye Weems Singleton, my whole profile comes up. I'm on other platforms, but that's one platform. You can also just check around word of mouth. There are persons who you know and you've heard that they're in therapy, and you can say, hey, do you think your therapist might take in your
Yep.
patients?
Yeah.
And you can do it that way. But the first step is just inquire.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard of Psychology Today, but that's a good one.
It's
And
come
I'm
to
gonna
psychologytoday.com.
psychologytoday.com. Yeah. Now, what if they're watching this show and they're like, you know what? I think I want to go to Dr. Faye. I want to.
Bye.
Are you accepting new clients
Yes.
or?
I am accepting new clients. Would not be able to see anyone for 3 to 4 weeks because I'm already booked
Booked
out
and
that
busy.
far.
Wow. That's a good
but
thing, like a
yeah.
good restaurant. Y'all listen.
But I am seeing new clients.
Okay. How would they reach out to you?
So if they go to psychologytoday.com,
Okay.
there's a phone number right there. They dial that number or send through email. That'll come directly to me, or they can dial 850-960-8301, and that will connect them with me directly. Or they can email me at Faye, Faye, .herring, HERRING, .rice, RICE, @gmail.com. So it might just be easier to go to psychology today.
That's yeah. Okay. Perfect. Good.
Dr. Faye, as we get ready to somewhat close out, is there anything else you want to share with someone that's actually watching in now concerning therapy? Anything you'd like to share?
I would really want to offer to anyone who is even thinking about therapy to just check with a therapist, inquire, and test it out to see whether or not that person is a fit. It's important to know that you're not always going to feel comfortable with the first person that you sit down with.
Okay.
And it is okay to say, I need to try out several therapists. Most therapists will provide free consultation for 15 to 30 minutes to help you get an idea whether or not this person is a good fit for you. But I hope you heard us say you don't have to wait until there's a challenge between father and daughter,
Right.
mom and
Yes,
daughter,
yes.
or that you are already depressed or anxious, but you recognize there's some self-work that I probably want to do, or I just want to be a better version of myself. So let me
Yes.
just sit
I
with
like that.
someone and see whether or not this is an opportunity for me to grow. So I encourage you, therapy and Jesus works.
Whoa, the combo. That's a combo. Number
That's
2,
good.
combo. I like
That's
that.
good.
Therapy and Jesus.
Yeah.
Dr. Faye, we want to just tell you, thank you so very much,
so
for being here, for sharing, your wisdom, your knowledge, your understanding. It's been nothing but a blessing, for you just to be in your present and, for us to be just, I would use the word, just illuminated, and enlightened, and thank you for clarifying, a lot of things, concerning, therapy, psychiatrists, because a lot of people don't think that way. But we just want to thank you on behalf of, Pops and Champs. We appreciate you from the bottom of our heart. And we pray God continue to bless you and your family as you continue to share your wisdom and knowledge of what God have in place in you. So again, on behalf of Pop and Champs, we want to say thank you and we love you.
all.
That's it.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you so very much. Yeah.
We really and truly want to thank you guys for
Yes.
tuning in. Be on the lookout for episode 3.
Yes,
that
yes.
will drop after this one.
Uno, dos.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Pops and
At
Champ.
Pops and Champs. Yes.
Subscribe and like and comment.
And comment.
I will be on there commenting. I think my dad reads the comments too. Probably on Instagram we read the comments, and then also follow us on Instagram. We're
Absolutely.
on Instagram at Pops and Champ. And TikTok too. Same thing at Pops and Champ. Facebook at Pops and Champ. So
That's right.
go and follow us everywhere and stay tuned for what we have coming up. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Hey, let's get it.